Some say that the most iconic fighter is the Spitfire, the guardian of the skies above the Channel. Others might tell the stories of the undefeated F-15 Eagle. But should you decide to search 55 degrees north and 38 degrees east, you might find another Eagle. The Golden Eagle. While many fighters get to take the virtual skies and their legacy will be remembered for generations, this one may never get the luxury to take to the skies. And with legacy buried under the fall of Soviet Union, it is already labeled as the forgotten fighter by the few who remember. But also, what some say is that it is the hope that dies last. It is time to give a chance to the Su-47 Bakut, the last fighter jet of its kind. Digital Combat Simulator, DCS in short, this is going to be our sandbox for this journey. DCS World is a place where fighters of all origins and eras get a virtual counterpart that is just as realistic as the real thing. We can, for example, climb into a cockpit of this Hornet. F-18 Hornet were created to full fidelity with all the systems, sensors working, just like they would in real life. It is a wonderful recreation, and one of a kind at that. Although you wouldn't expect less if you have to put down $80 for a single plane. Although DCS boys always know to wait for a sale, but still. DCS World has been around for a while, recently celebrating 15 years of existence. It released in 2008. Now, these planes require extensive research and team of game developers, and most importantly, declassified information about the plane. Not that classified information is a problem. I mean, the worst that can happen is that they will arrest one of your employees at the airport for trying to smuggle F-16 manual. That happened. Also, most of the specifications of new fighter jets is kept safe within the walls of Pentagon or Kremlin, or average War Thunder forum thread. That also happened. But considering the reality, most planes that get made are usually older jets of mainly 4th generation and older, and also American or European, since Russian designs. That is difficult to get your hands at. Speaking of Russian, it's your all-time favorite, Mr. 47. So smash before you get smashed. Always endorsing string cheese comes for cover. You know that the knowledge we possess about Mr. 47 is not extensive. Although I have managed to find some pamphlets. And this magazine, which elaborates further into Su-47. And believe me, to get this one, that really took some effort and time. There simply are no books, no nothing, about 47. I know that the aviation community doesn't like when mostly classified planes get created in DCS due to the lack of authenticity. And I also know that the mainstream public doesn't like anything Russian, with the special military operation really not helping. And I suppose that to get you on the side of this eagle, we are going to have to thread a needle. Although, as is always, if in doubt, flat out. So here's basic information you should know about the 47. It is a 4.5 generation Russian experimental fighter jet with forward swept wings, i.e. wings with negative geometry. Well, let's clear the sky from all the terms you may not understand, and if you do, subscribe, and if you do not, subscribe too. In general, as the jet engine found its way into aviation, it set a new course of fighter aircraft development, and thus the first generation was born. To a Nazi scientist. Oh yep. You can try to gloss over it with a Gloster Meteor, but the most famous first-gen fighter would be the Messerschmitt 262. The second generation led to improved avionics and also the realization that the future is in using more advanced air-to-air weaponry in form of missiles, although too many missiles instead of guns was soon about to backfire. An example of a second-gen jet is, for example, the MiG-21, capable of carrying nuclear armaments. Third generation was one of the most iconic airplanes, the F-4 Phantom, and it was here, specifically in Vietnam, that relying on air-to-air missiles only, without integrating guns, was leaving the jets vulnerable if the missiles failed. And they did. Fourth generation, compact, multi-role and with can-do attitude. Those are the fourth-gen aircraft. All the Tomcats and Hornets and Su-27s. And it is for the first time when majority of fighting would be done in BVR, beyond visual range combat. In other words, to many DCS players, the most boring way to play DCS. 4.5 generation. This is the home of Su-47 and other airplanes which utilize advanced avionics, composite materials and improve on the formula of 4th generation. 5th gen. These fighters mainly possess stealth capabilities that define them. For example, most famous fighters would be the F-22, Raptor and F-35 Lightning. Despite many people hating on stealth, it is the future of combat, an epitaph for the art of dogfighting. This new generation is about to forever leave behind. But back to 47. Thanks to the wing shape and Sukhoi line perks, the maneuverability is at the peak. With some insane angles of attack, this plane can pull off some impressive sharp turns, almost like I don't know, which you would do in rallying. No, we're not gonna go there, not yet. Next up is power. As one very wise philosopher said,
I have a policy here, speed and power, because in my mind, speed makes you lighter.
And Su-47 has it all. In fact, assuming the Su-47 is equipped with the engines designed for it, the D30F11, and not the old D30F6 engines, the power with the D30F11 engines reaches at least 152 kN each engine. Just to put things into perspective, F-18 Hornet has 80 kN of thrust with GE402 engines. That means that one engine of Su-47 is almost as powerful as the entire twin-engine Hornet. Obviously, to avoid Russian bias, the Russian engines are over-reliant on Afterburner, and they are also sometimes under. Now, it's not about strength or power, but about touching the sky. Although, Mr. 47 is a thirsty fella, he does enjoy a good drink, and to keep the high speed up, it does take its toll on range. And also, let us not forget that due to its unstable nature, it does require extensive fly-by-wire to operate. Fly-by-wire meaning that the airplane needs computer assistance to remain flyable for the pilot, but unstable designs do increase maneuverability. Now, when you know Su-47 on the paper, it's time to break through the paper skies and set our course into the unknown. That is the development and engineering of the Su-47 for DCS. So, to give Mr. 47 wings, I needed a plan. First, we had to obtain, well, the plane itself, the 3D model. Due to my lack of knowledge of non-parametric modeling softwares like Blender and others, I am not the right person to model Su-47. Plus, there is one other reason. And on the other hand, if I would try to design it in Inventor or Fusion 360, let's be honest, this would be a work in progress for next 5 years, and society would not look upon this fondly.
No.
Now, how do you exactly mod DCS? Good question. You see, there is not exactly a step-by-step guide, but there are a few sources, the most valuable being the Beginner's Guide to DCS World Aircraft Mods. Sadly, it has been discontinued and the newest version is 0.51 from 2015, so it's not a one-stop solution to the great DCS modding question. But there are a few other sources we can use. For example, the great starting point is the Jinx's DCS modding guide for a simple airplane mod. This was my starting point back in the day. Another source would be the other mods. The good old work of reverse engineering what others have created, and since Eagle Dynamics have encrypted their fighters, it's the only way to really reach the sky. for someone like me who doesn't know how the DCS modding works. So, for our temporary vessel, I have chosen the VSN Eurofighter, and now we have barely enough knowledge to create something. But let's remind ourselves of what we say in Realism: if in doubt, flat out. So first, I had to obtain Blender and the EDM plugin made for it. Then I imported a model, mounted it onto an armature, enabled the EDM nodes for the appropriate parts of the plane, using the glass from Eurofighter, arguably not the best looking one, and the original textures for the rest. I know, I do not have a recording of what I have done here, but the reality is that I have been rushing the production on the good old Soviet 150% speed because I wanted to create a flyable SU-47 for Christmas. But nonetheless, we needed to tackle the landing gear in a record time, while DCS is laying sticks on the path we are running on before we get to take to the skies. One example is the very specific way how you have to animate in Blender using bones only, and yet sometimes the animation works fine in Blender, but DCS just decides nope. And animation breaks, and you gotta do it all over again. But at this point, we are well past theorizing about insanity. So it's all hands on deck until December 24th. The SU-47 has a fully animated landing gear and basic functionality, and before midnight I even found a big enough Christmas hat. Truly right on time. But if you think this is it, it's done, we're not even halfway there. So next, we need properly animated control surfaces. In other words, we need rudder, also known as vertical stabilizer, then we need ailerons and elevators including canards, then we need flaps and slats. Flaps help Mr. 47 take off quickly, and slats help to a higher angle of attack, which Mr. 47 already has plenty, with a certain nose authority to its name. The SU-47 does not have these control surfaces split into sections as a model, but luckily for us, the SU-47 at least has control surfaces modeled correctly, and they are enclosed. So I do not have to do a lot of fixing, although sometimes some fixing is needed. But there is a bigger problem: the intelligence gathering.
God, those communists are amazing.
There is limited information on how these control surfaces work exactly. For example, the canards. Do they also help with roll, or do they only work as vertical stabilizers? Well, hard to tell. Also considering that the SU-47 build was not built up to the design standard and costs were cut after the collapse of Soviet Union. So I decided to, for example, give the canards control overall. Since it is used this way on at least somewhat similar aircraft like Eurofighter, but similar, I mean there are not many other jets like SU-47. But probably the hardest of them all was the rudder, because trying to find a way how the SU-47's rudder works is difficult. Plus, it is used also as an air brake, and thus it needs to be well animated, and also, since you cannot use degrees and EDM files but you have to use this quaternion system, it was a pain to get all those angles right. Authentic and perhaps realistic. There was a lot more fixing taking place in the rear part of the airplane, especially since the rudder was not completely sealed, so I had to do some fixing there, and well, after many hours I can tell that I no longer support the rear part, and now I only like 70% of the SU-47. But well, we had to go back to the back to get the elevators working, since well, half of the controls of SU-47 are in the rear, so I suppose we'll come back to the channel. Horizontal stabilizer. And then I obviously discover that after I animated the ailerons, well, those weren't ailerons, but flaps. So after many long nights, finally, flaps, ailerons, slats, working. And one thing, I have decided to jump the ship and use Su-35 mod as the vessel for the Su-47 because it has a custom cockpit, but most importantly, the values we may not be able to obtain for Su-47 will most likely be similar to Su-35. Suspension and nose gear turning. Animation. If the tail was not the greatest challenge, then this certainly takes the crown. Just look at all those bones. This truly was a nightmare to assemble, to work, and even then, it turned out the Su-35 mod has a suspension issue where it goes through ground. I was able to fix it, but to explain the fix it is going to take some time. Basically, what I have learned through experimentation is that the suspension has a direct amortizer, normal amortizer, and a reverse amortizer value. Direct is a maximum expansion, the normal is under normal weight, and reverse amortizer is maximum compression. The partial workaround to avoid nose sinking to the ground was to set the normal compression as close as possible to the direct amortizer value. But while it looks nice, if you pull full afterburner, it still sinks into the ground a bit. This sadly seems to be beyond my knowledge of fixing, since the animation gets completed, which should mean maximum compression and stop, but somehow it sinks further. This issue is Su-35 specific, and since the original mod suffers it too, it might take me a very long way to figure out. Especially since even the home of the Su-35 mod, the experienced Su-30 Discord, was unable to deliver any real answers, because the guy who made the mod decided to disappear from surface of the earth. But despite this, I managed to mount the suspension and turning together alongside the entire animation, and I gotta say, it do be looking good. Then I synchronized the Afterburner for a nice effect, and Su-47 already is looking at a brighter tomorrows. The only issue is that almost every element of the mod takes me days to figure out how it works and how can I implement it. There was a lot of extra development including rear suspension, but it's the same story. But day after day, or more like week after week, since the figuring out how the mod works took at least 60% of the entire development, and the 47 is looking sharp. The last thing remaining is the first flight. Let me, for the first time, let the engine and wings do the talking instead of just words.